This story is about Miles Carter, a black education investor who returned home after a summit only to be stopped at the gate of his own mansion by two security guards he had unknowingly helped employ through a rehabilitation program. But the real twist, the neighbor who accused him of being an intruder, worked at a school funded by his foundation. What unfolded next wasn't just about bias, it was about reclaiming power, truth, and legacy. "You got ID for that house, sir?" The question shouldn't have stung, but it did. Miles Carter had just flown back from Boston, where his keynote speech at the National Education Reform Summit earned him a standing ovation. He'd spoken about second chances, about building bridges between communities and institutions, and about the dignity of reintegration. Now, as his black BMW i7 pulled into the crescent-shaped driveway of his own $4.6 million home in Paradise Valley, he was being treated like a stranger. The guards stood firm at the security booth, dressed in charcoal gray uniforms, with the logo of Next Step Civic Reintegration, a private security firm that prided itself on hiring formerly incarcerated men. Ironically, Miles had funded the nonprofit partnership that helped launch the program in Arizona. "Yes," Miles replied, voice calm, but each word measured. He handed over his license and keycard. "This is my address. That is my name. I built this house from the ground up, literally." The taller guard, Andre, took the card and ID, squinting, like he was solving a puzzle. The younger one, Malik, crossed his arms and leaned in to peer at Miles with a kind of squinting suspicion that no training manual could justify. "We didn't get any notice from management about a late arrival," Malik muttered. "You shouldn't need one," Miles said. "It's my home." Andre cleared his throat. "We've had complaints from residents about unfamiliar vehicles circling the block. A woman called in something about feeling unsafe." Miles looked past them toward the beige stucco house across the street. A faint glow in the kitchen window. He didn't need to guess. She was watching. Amanda Cole. He remembered her from the HOA meetings, always polite, but with that twitch in her jaw when he spoke too confidently. She was the kind of neighbor who used the phrase "well-spoken" like it was a compliment. Just as he was about to ask the guards to review the security footage archive, the front door of Amanda's house creaked open. She walked out in fuzzy slippers and a Patagonia vest, holding a half-empty glass of Chardonnay, like it was part of a costume. "That's him," she said casually, voice lilting with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I told you, I've never seen that man before. He doesn't live here." Miles felt the air shift. Not just the temperature, but the unspoken authority she carried as a white woman in a wealthy neighborhood, backed by no badge, no title, just a suggestion wrapped in confidence. Malik nodded slightly, as if her word now sealed their doubt. "I've lived here for 6 years," Miles replied. "That woman moved in last spring." "You think I built this house from brochures?" Amanda sipped and shrugged. "I just asked the guards to be sure. Safety first, right?" Andre spoke into his walkie, stalling for time. Malik kept watching Miles like a coach analyzing a rival's game tape. Miles leaned back in his seat. He could see the porch lights of his home glowing like beacons. His daughter's bedroom light was on just a sliver, but it reminded him of what mattered. He stayed calm. This wasn't new, not the doubt, not the gatekeeping. But what burned was that the people enforcing it weren't outsiders. They were two black men like him, men who probably knew what it felt like to be misjudged. Miles could have shouted flexed status, name-dropped donors. Instead, he made one call to Lena, his executive assistant. "Call the property manager," he said. "Apparently, I need permission to enter my own life." As he hung up, Malik spoke again. "You look tense, sir." "No offense, but if this really was your place, wouldn't the system open the gate automatically?" Miles turned toward him, eyes focused. "No offense," he echoed. "But if that was your criteria for truth, no one would have been freed from jail." Amanda interrupted again, her voice light as whipped air. "Sorry, I just never noticed a BMW like that in this driveway before. Maybe you just switched cars." Miles's smile was tight. "You've lived across the street for 10 months. In that time, I've pulled into this driveway in this exact car at least 40 times. The issue isn't the car, it's me." Amanda blinked. "Excuse me. You didn't notice the black man pulling into the only black-owned home on this street. But suddenly tonight you do, and I'm a threat." The words landed like iron against glass. Malik and Andre froze. Amanda recoiled. "I never said threat." "No," Miles said. "But that's what you meant. And they—" he pointed to the guards, "acted like it." Amanda shifted her weight. "We're just being cautious. Families live here." Miles didn't raise his voice. "You don't get to call it caution when it's based on assumption. That's not protecting the neighborhood. That's policing me." Andre stepped back, clearly uncomfortable now. Malik stiffened. The silence buzzed like a wire ready to snap. Amanda gave one last sip of her wine, muttered something about needing peace, and returned inside. That's when Lena texted property manager, "Just called. Gate should open now." As the gate slid open, with an almost reluctant hum, Miles didn't smile. "You're clear to enter," Sir Andre said. "No." Miles answered, eyes straight ahead. "I was always clear." And with that, the car crept forward, slow, deliberate, as if driving through fog made of history and memory. The sound of the gate shutting behind him didn't feel like entry. It felt like exile. And as he stepped out in front of the glass-paneled house, briefcase in hand, porch light, glowing gently above, something inside him shifted. Not just because Amanda's words still echoed, or because his own guards had failed him, but because of something far more uncomfortable. He had helped build this system. And tonight, it had swallowed him whole. Miles didn't go upstairs right away. Instead, he stood in the foyer, shoes still on, jacket draped over his arm, staring at the darkened hallway like it was unfamiliar terrain. The house smelled like lemon oil and jasmine, details his housekeeper Luce always perfected before he came home. But tonight, the scent didn't soothe. It mocked him. Everything looked pristine, prepared, curated to welcome him. Yet, he had to prove he belonged before crossing the gate. He dropped his briefcase by the marble entry table and pulled out his phone again, not to scroll, not to call, but to open the security app. He rewound the front gate feed. There it was, Amanda barefoot on concrete, swishing her wine like it was an accessory, saying clearly, "I've never seen that man before. He doesn't live here." Miles replayed it. Once, then again. Not because he needed proof, but because he needed to feel the weight of her certainty. That kind of confidence, the kind that rewrites truth, just by being spoken aloud, wasn't about facts. It was about positioning. Amanda wasn't alone in it. Malik and Andre didn't just follow orders. They aligned with the power they subconsciously recognized. In a twisted way, they had internalized the very logic Miles spent his career fighting. They hadn't profiled him because he was black. They had profiled him because someone white said he didn't belong, and that made it safe to act. He closed the app and walked toward the side hallway where his home office sat untouched. There, on the far wall, was a photo from 5 years ago. Miles in a gray t-shirt, holding his daughter Zara on his hip as contractors posed behind them. No landscaping yet, no paint on the stucco, just dirt and promise. That was the day he got the final permit signed and keys handed over. That was the day the gate opened freely for the first time. He clenched his jaw. Something cracked inside. Not anger, not bitterness, but clarity. This wasn't just about Amanda. It wasn't just about Malik and Andre. It was about systems disguised as favors. The very security firm that trained and placed these guards. Next step was a civic reintegration initiative Miles himself had supported 3 years ago. He sat on their advisory board. He funded their pilot program. He believed in second chances for incarcerated men. But what did it say when those second chances were weaponized against the very communities they were meant to uplift? He grabbed his phone again. No notes, no script, just a call. "Gina," he said when the head of the program picked up. "We need to talk about who's protecting whom." After a tense pause, he called Lena again. "Let's schedule a mandatory meeting with all on-site security staff. Tomorrow morning. Courtyard. 8 sharp. You want me to loop in Next Step Corporate? Lena asked. No, he said. I want them to see this first. Unfiltered. He hung up and finally made his way upstairs, the hardwood steps creaking beneath his weight. In Zara's room, the nightlight cast soft shadows over a pile of blankets and limbs. She was fast asleep, a pink giraffe tucked under her chin. Miles leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're the reason I won't let this slide." But downstairs, beneath the warmth of family and fragrance, the foundation of his trust had cracked. The gate wasn't just a fence. It had become a threshold between being respected and being questioned, between building a legacy and being reminded it could still be revoked with a glance. And tomorrow morning, he was going to make sure every single person who stood behind that gate understood what it truly meant to stand for something. The next morning, Miles stood at the edge of the second-floor balcony, hands resting on the iron railing, as the Arizona sun began to edge its way over the ridgeline. The courtyard below shimmered with dew and silence. His daughter's pink giraffe still sat on the hallway bench behind him, the symbol of everything he was trying to protect, not just her safety, but the world she was growing up in. The world he had helped build, and now realized he'd have to rebuild differently. At exactly 7:59 a.m., the sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the silence. 6 black SUVs rolled in, one by one, parking in a semicircle behind the marble courtyard fountain. 5 guards stepped out, uniforms pressed, faces blank, and behind them, in a wrinkled blazer that didn't quite fit, came Gordon Vance, the regional manager of Next Step Civic Reintegration. Miles didn't walk down right away. He let them wait. 2 minutes of quiet, not to punish, but to make them feel something deeper, the weight of what they almost dismissed as a misunderstanding. When he finally emerged, he wasn't wearing a suit. No tie, no armor, just a gray, fitted polo black slacks, and the kind of controlled posture that demanded attention without ever raising a voice. He walked slowly across the courtyard, stopping a few feet in front of them, eyes scanning the group until they landed on Malik and Andre. "Gentlemen," he began. "Let's skip the pleasantries." Gordon straightened. "Mr. Carter, I want to start by saying we've reviewed the footage." The guards acknowledged that last night's response did not meet our. Miles raised a hand, silencing him. "Let me be clear. This isn't about a delay at the gate. It's about something far worse: submission to a false authority. You were presented with ID, a keycard, even the digital logs that verify my comings and goings. Yet you deferred immediately, not to a manager, not to protocol, but to a woman with a wineglass and a whisper." Malik looked down. Andre fidgeted, lips pressed into a hard line. "You acted," Miles continued, "not out of caution, but out of conditioned fear. And what's worse, you acted against someone who looked like you." Gordon tried again, this time more cautiously. "We deeply regret the breakdown in procedure." "This wasn't a procedural failure," Miles snapped, but not loudly. The sharpness came from restraint, not volume. This was cultural. The silence hung heavy. No one moved. "You were placed here through a program I believed in," he said. "A program I helped fund. Because I thought that second chances meant more than just employment. They meant empowerment. But what good is reintegration if we're just training people to replicate the same system that marginalized them?" Gordon stepped forward again, palms up. "If I may suggest a formal review." "Maybe retraining." Miles shook his head. "You don't retrain character. You don't workshop integrity." He turned to Malik and Andre. "If Amanda Cole had pointed at a white man last night, any white man, would either of you have kept him waiting at the gate?" They didn't answer. They didn't have to. Miles let the question float between them, before stepping back just half a foot, but it was enough to widen the distance from forgiveness. "This isn't just about me," he said. "It's about every kid who watched that video this morning and saw you side with power, not truth. Every employee here represents more than a company. You represent the message we send to our children about who deserves access and who still needs permission. He let the pause linger, then delivered the cut clean. As of this morning, your contract with this property is terminated. All of you. Gordon's mouth opened, but no sound came out. No appeals. No reconsideration. Miles said, voice calm. Leave your badges and equipment with Luce at the front desk. I expect the premises clear of all next step personnel by noon. Andre looked stunned. Malik blinked, like he didn't understand what had just happened. You had your chance last night, Miles added, and you chose comfort over courage. Gordon nodded slowly, realizing there was no recovery, no spin, only consequence. Miles turned and walked back into the house. He didn't slam the door. He didn't need to. Inside, the air was cooler, lighter, not because a problem had been solved, but because it had finally been named out loud. For too long, Miles had supported systems that operated in his name, but not in his image. Systems that trained men to follow the rules without asking who wrote them. But this time, silence wouldn't save them. Because someone else had seen what happened. Someone across the street. Someone who had captured it all and was about to make the world pay attention. The camera caught everything. From across the street, tucked behind a camellia bush on Jordan Kim's porch, a small black ring device had recorded the whole interaction at the gate, the moment Amanda pointed her wine glass, the way Malik's shoulders stiffened. Andre's hesitation, Miles' calm refusal to shrink. Jordan hadn't planned on getting involved. He wasn't the type. 37 Korean-American father of twins, cybersecurity analyst, introvert by nature. But when his phone buzzed that night with motion detection from the front yard, he'd tapped the feed curious. And what he saw made his stomach turn. He didn't know Miles well, just enough to wave when the trash bins went out, or nod at HOA meetings. But what unfolded outside the gate didn't sit right. So the next morning, after seeing Miles walk away from that courtyard meeting with the weight of something righteous but heavy, Jordan made a quiet decision. He clipped a 2-minute segment from the footage. Nothing fancy, no commentary, just facts. Then he posted it to his private Instagram account with a single caption. This shouldn't happen to anyone, especially at their own gate. He didn't expect it to go viral, but by 9 a.m., it had 4,000 views. By noon, $38,000. A local radio station picked it up, then a podcast. By late afternoon, it had hit a major national blog. No hashtags, no dramatics. Just footage of a black man, calm and professional, being questioned about whether he lived in his own home. Amanda's voice, casual and confident, floated through the video like a haunting echo. I've never seen him before. He doesn't live here. The internet responded the way fire responds to dry grass. Comment sections exploded. That wineglass woman knew exactly what she was doing. How many receipts does a black man have to carry to be left alone? He handled it better than I would have. Respect. And while the world reacted, Amanda Cole did exactly what Amanda Cole would do. She doubled down. That evening, she went live on Facebook from her backyard. Wearing another beige matching sweat set and full makeup, she stood in front of a rose trellis like she was hosting a cooking show. I just want to clear the air, she began, voice soft, hand brushing her bangs back with calculated effort. People are spinning the story all wrong. I didn't accuse anyone of anything. I simply expressed concern. I didn't recognize the man. It was dark. The car was unfamiliar. All I said was for the guards to double-check, because safety comes first. She smiled into the camera like it was a job interview. I believe in diversity. I voted for diversity. But that doesn't mean we throw caution out the window. The internet was not kind. Comments flooded in midstream. You believe in diversity, like I believe in unicorns. So you voted for diversity. What does that even mean? Just say you got caught and log off, Amanda. Within an hour, clips of her video were turned into skits, remixes, even an auto-tuned TikTok anthem titled Voted for Diversity. Her face became a meme, her voice a punchline. Meanwhile, Miles said nothing. No interviews, no tweets, not even a statement. He simply watched, listened, measured the noise. But inside his office, he was building something quieter, something with more permanence than virality. He spent the evening on the phone, not with PR agents, but with a legal advocacy nonprofit he'd supported quietly for years. He requested one thing: an emergency fund to support families impacted by unlawful profiling, with zero bureaucracy, just trust. By Tuesday morning, as Amanda's face bounced between trending feeds and late-night ridicule, Miles stepped outside his house and recorded a video of his own. No suit, no sunglasses. Just him in front of the same gate where the night had fractured. His tone wasn't angry. It was steady. Honest. "My name is Miles Carter," he said. "I'm a father, a son, and the founder of several education initiatives that serve communities across this country. Last Friday night, I was stopped outside my own home, questioned and delayed, not because of something I did, but because of how someone else decided I looked." He turned, slightly gesturing to the gate behind him. "This gate was meant to protect what I've built, but in that moment it became another barrier. One more test. One more demand to prove that I belong, despite every paper keycard or piece of truth I had on me." He paused. The wind lifted the edges of his collar. "I didn't post the video," he said, "but I'm not angry it exists. Because now, we can't pretend this doesn't happen. We can't pretend silence is safety. We can't keep calling profiling precaution and letting neighbors rewrite facts with a sip of Chardonnay." The video passed 1 million views by sunset. But Miles didn't check. He turned off his phone after uploading, walked into his daughter's room, and spent the evening letting her braid his hair with plastic beads. "You look like a warrior, Daddy," she said, giggling. He smiled. Because this time, he knew warriors didn't always carry swords. Some just stood at gates and refused to flinch. "You look like a warrior, Daddy." The beads clicked softly as Zara finished the last braid. Miles sat cross-legged on the living room rug, letting her arrange his curls into a crown of plastic confidence. And as she stood back to admire her work, he realized something: the battle wasn't behind him. It had only just begun. The internet had seen the video. They'd heard his voice. And most had responded with support, outraged solidarity. But he knew better than to mistake volume for change. Algorithms echo. Real life resists. And by morning, the resistance began. At 7:43 a.m., his inbox flooded. Not with threats, not with praise, but with requests. The school district emailed asking if he could provide clarification to ease tensions among faculty. The HOA wanted him to issue a joint community statement promoting unity. Even the real estate agency that sold Amanda her house sent a representative to check on property image management. Each message polite, each message thinly veiled. They didn't want truth. They wanted containment. Miles closed the laptop, walked to the foyer, stared out the tall windows toward the cul-de-sac. The very people who stayed silent when Amanda cast suspicion with a smile now wanted his help restoring peace. But peace, he thought, should never require the silencing of truth. He had planned to say no to the press, no to the city, no to the show. But sometimes silence wasn't grace. It was complicity. And so, with the same calm he'd held at the gate, he made a choice. He told them all, "Yes, I'll speak, but I'll do it my way. No press room, no corporate backdrop, no choreographed apology tour. Just a mic, a patch of gravel in his front courtyard, and the same gate that tried to keep him out." By noon they came. More than expected. A small crowd gathered just outside the property line. Neighbors, journalists, a few strangers who had driven in from nearby towns holding coffee cups, and quiet curiosity. Amanda was there too. Sunglasses on. Lipstick perfect. Standing behind a row of HOA members, like they were her personal jury. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her posture screamed, "I'm composed," but her fingers clenched her phone like a lifeline. Miles stepped up to the mic. Alone. He didn't clear his throat. Didn't shuffle notes. He just looked forward and began. "No one calls the fire department when a white man pulls into his own driveway," he said. A low rustle swept through the crowd. No one pauses to ask if a white man belongs in the car he's driving, or the house he's entering, or the neighborhood he walks through. He let the silence settle like dust. But I've had to prove myself since I was 12. That I wasn't stealing. That I wasn't lying. That I was just existing. He turned, briefly glanced up at his house. I worked for every square inch of this home. I didn't inherit it. I built it, brick by brick. Late nights, early flights, missed birthdays, and deals held together with grit and grace. He faced the crowd again. And yet, a wineglass and a whisper were enough to stop me at the gate. Amanda shifted slightly. Someone near her looked down. "This is not about one woman's opinion," Miles continued. "This is about the system we pretend doesn't exist, the one that lets fear speak louder than facts, that lets comfort crowd out justice." His voice lowered, almost tender now. "I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I didn't break anything. I showed restraint. I gave grace. Not because I had to, but because I've been here before. Too many of us have." He paused, then looked directly at Amanda. "And I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because I have a daughter. And one day, she might come home from college and be stopped at her own front gate. I want her to know, we don't shrink. We don't apologize for existing. We show up, we speak up, and we move forward." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small white envelope, and placed it on the mic stand. "This week, my company finalized a donation to the Phoenix Legal Advocacy Fund. For those who don't have cameras, or money or headlines to protect them." A quiet inhale from the crowd. "Because if this can happen to me, it's already happening to people with no voice at all." He turned to walk away, stopped. One last sentence. "If you're more uncomfortable with me telling this story than with the fact that it happened, then maybe it's time to ask why." No applause, no chance. Just a stillness that hung in the air like truth suspended. Amanda left early, quietly. By nightfall, her social media accounts vanished. But Miles wasn't watching screens anymore. He was sitting on the porch, Zara on his lap, her plastic beads still in his hair. And when she asked why people were whispering outside, he smiled and said, "They're just learning how to listen. They're just learning how to listen." Miles whispered, brushing Zara's braid behind her ear as she curled into his chest. The sun had dipped low behind the Palo Verde trees, casting long shadows over the gravel courtyard, where hours earlier silence had held more power than applause. But inside the Ellison home, things were soft again, warm, grounded. For a moment, it felt like peace. Until the news trucks arrived. By Wednesday morning, the neighborhood was no longer just a zip code. It was a headline. Local outlets parked vans along the curb. A drone buzzed overhead. A blogger live-streamed from the sidewalk across the street, calling the Ellison house ground zero for modern profiling in America. Zara's school called to check if she needed any emotional support services. Strangers dropped off flowers and notes at the mailbox. A man drove up from Tucson just to stand at the gate and thank Miles for doing what so many of us couldn't say out loud. But attention is a tricky thing. It brings light, but it also attracts shadows. Late that evening, a knock at the door startled Luce as she folded blankets in the den. Miles answered it himself. A courier stood there holding a folder with a wax seal official, but not government. Inside was a letter from a group calling themselves the Concerned Patrons of Educational Unity. Polished language, corporate fonts, carefully vague. In essence, the group disapproved of Miles's public stance. They appreciated his investment in youth empowerment, but felt his recent comments may have compromised neutrality in the academic sphere. They requested a review of his foundation's influence over certain school programs, particularly those involving curriculum changes, diversity seminars, and funding allocations in majority-white districts. Miles read it twice, then a third time. He recognized the tone. Not rage, not rejection, just veiled exclusion. The kind that doesn't slam doors, it just slowly shifts the walls inward. At the bottom of the letter were 3 signatures. One caught his eye. Amanda Cole. It hit harder than her words at the gate, because this wasn't a neighborhood squabble anymore. This was retaliation, dressed in professionalism, wrapped in boardroom grammar. He walked upstairs and stood at the threshold of Zara's room again. Her lamp glowed soft pink. Her giraffe now wore one of his old neckties. She had placed it there earlier that day, announcing it was his new security team. He smiled, but his chest felt tight. The truth was, Amanda hadn't acted alone. The system she leaned on was wide, deep, and now it was reacting. He called Lena. "Get me the full donor ledger for Cole's school district. Every grant we've issued in the last 3 years. I want dates, amounts, recipients, and notes on who advocated for each disbursement." "Are you planning to pull funds?" Lena asked. "No," he said. "Not yet. But I want to know exactly who's eating from a table they're trying to flip." The next morning, Miles drove to Cole's school unannounced. Not to start a scene, but to watch. He stood across the street, sunglasses on silent, as a group of fifth graders filed into the building under a banner that read, "Tomorrow's leaders begin here." He recognized that banner. His foundation had paid for it. He recognized the community garden. His grant funded that too. He recognized the music room through the open side door. Without his intervention 2 years ago, it would have been converted into a testing center. That afternoon, the school board held a meeting to discuss whether external partnerships like Miles's should be re-evaluated for influence over equity messaging. No one from the board called him. No one invited him to speak. But he showed up anyway. He sat in the back row, silent in a tailored navy sweater and jeans. The room tensed when he entered, but no one addressed him directly. Instead, the board debated his presence like a ghost, referring to him only as a benefactor, or the recent events. Then, during open comments, a janitor named Ellis stood up. "I cleaned the music room y'all almost shut down." Ellis said, his voice gravel but steady. "My grandson learned to play violin in that room. The donor you're talking about, he didn't just write a check. He sat in that room and asked my grandson what he wanted to play. Don't confuse visibility with power. The man gave you both." The room went quiet. Someone coughed. The board called for recess. Miles stood up, walked out. The battle had changed. No longer about gates and guards. This was about erasure, systemic, institutional, polite. But Miles wasn't angry. He was prepared. Because this time, he wasn't walking back into his home alone. He was walking into the fire holding every receipt. He was walking into the fire holding every receipt. And when he stepped into the marble atrium of the city's civic education hall that Friday morning, the temperature wasn't just metaphorical. The lobby was already buzzing with a strange mix of polished concern and manufactured calm. Miles walked past the volunteers, adjusting lanyards for the quarterly donor partner roundtable, past the polished plaques, listing the names of legacy contributors, his own name chiseled in bronze among them, and into the main conference room where the real stage had been set. On paper, the gathering was routine, a closed-door session between private education donors, public school officials, and select community stakeholders. But everyone in that room knew it wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was a reckoning. Not loud, not angry, but layered with all the unspoken tension of a place where money race and power had quietly collided. Amanda was there, seated 2 rows from the front, flanked by 3 fellow board members, who now seemed less like colleagues and more like a firewall. She wore a pressed white blazer, no sunglasses this time, just a quiet stiffness in her posture, and a stack of neatly tabbed notes in her lap. She didn't look at Miles when he entered, but she didn't have to. Her shoulders did the speaking. He took his seat at the front table. Lena was already there, 3 folders in front of her, posture unreadable. Miles nodded once. That was enough. The moderator, a soft-spoken assistant superintendent named Althea Jordan, cleared her throat and welcomed everyone. "We're here today to ensure transparency," she said, "and to reaffirm our shared commitment to educational integrity." Miles waited. They spent the first 20 minutes talking around him. Phrases like ensuring nonpartisan partnerships, minimizing external influence, and resetting community optics floated through the air like bland smoke. Amanda finally leaned forward to speak, voice smooth and steady. "We appreciate Mr. Carter's contributions," she said, "but we also have a duty to ensure that donor influence doesn't alienate the wider community. Some parents have expressed concerns about the tone of recent messaging, especially online." Miles leaned slightly forward, resting his fingertips on the polished wood. "May I respond?" A pause. Then a nod from Althea. Miles didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "When I wrote the check for Eastdale Elementary's music program," he began, "no one questioned my influence. When I paid for translation services so immigrant parents could attend PTA meetings, no one filed a concern. When I funded the school's conflict resolution initiative, which prevented 5 suspensions last year, I didn't hear a word about neutrality." He scanned the room. "But the moment I told the truth about my own driveway, now suddenly, I'm too political." Silence. "I haven't asked your teachers to recite my name. I haven't posted billboards. I didn't even ask for a plaque. But I've shown up. Quietly. Consistently. And what I've given wasn't just money, it was memory. It was opportunity. And I won't let that be rewritten, because one person felt uncomfortable being seen for who they really are." Amanda's expression didn't crack, but her eyes flickered toward the camera crew quietly filming from the back. Lena opened the folders and passed them down. "These are itemized reports," she said. "Every dollar, every district, every documented outcome. And attached, you'll find parental testimonials, student letters, and year-end evaluations, all unsolicited." Althea flipped through the first few pages. Her brow furrowed. Miles stood. "I'm not asking for gratitude," he said. "I'm asking for clarity. Because if the problem is my influence, then we need to talk about everyone else's too. The corporations funding standardized test lobbying. The private interests shaping curriculum through safety training. The developers who attend these very meetings because they want school zoning that boosts home values." He looked directly at Amanda. "I'm not the threat. I'm just inconvenient to your comfort." The room shifted. One board member coughed. Another put down her pen. Then Althea spoke again, quietly, but with weight. "I think it's time we stop pretending neutrality means silence." She looked around the room. "This isn't a vote," she said. "This is a mirror. What you see in it is up to you." The session ended without a formal resolution. But no one could unhear what had been said. As people filed out, some avoided Miles's gaze. Others touched his shoulder softly, offering nods of respect. One principal from South Phoenix whispered, "We've got your back." Amanda walked past without a word. But Miles wasn't watching her anymore. He stood in the sunlight just outside the hall, watching kids pour out of a bus nearby. Backpacks, bouncing laughter, loud sneakers squeaking on pavement. And in that moment, he saw it clearly. The fight wasn't about gates, or donors, or even headlines. It was about who gets to build the future, and who still has to ask permission to enter it. And he had no intention of asking ever again.